5 unanswered calls. That is what a marriage costs when a man decides his comfort matters more than his family. While Garrett Hollis was ordering a second bottle of Barolo in a candlelit suite at the Four Seasons, his 8-year-old daughter was seizing on the bathroom floor of their home in Naperville, Illinois. His wife, Cora, had been calling since 9:17 that night. She had called until her thumb went numb. She had called until the paramedics arrived and took over, and she had to drop the phone to run alongside the stretcher. And Garrett, 39 years old, senior vice president at Meridian Capital, a man who prided himself on never missing a quarterly call, had looked at the screen, seen her name, and set the phone face down on the linen tablecloth. He thought he had time. Men like Garrett always think they have time. Cora Hollis was 32. She had spent the last decade being the kind of wife who made Garrett look better than he was. She had left her graduate program in urban planning when they moved to Chicago for his promotion. She had handled every parent-teacher conference, every school fundraiser, every pediatric appointment, while Garrett logged 60-hour weeks and called it dedication. She had built a life inside his life, quietly and without complaint, the way women are taught to believe is love. Their daughter Ivy had been diagnosed with a rare seizure disorder at age 6. It was managed mostly with medication and careful monitoring. The neurologist Dr. Callahan had been clear: if a grand mal event lasted more than 3 minutes, call 911 immediately. The EpiPen protocol was taped inside the kitchen cabinet. The emergency numbers were laminated and stuck to the refrigerator. Cora had memorized them the way other mothers memorized lullabies. That Thursday night in October, Garrett had told Cora he was flying to Cincinnati for a client dinner. The Whitmore Group, a potential partnership worth $40 million. He said he would be back by Friday noon. What he did not say was that the woman joining him for dinner was named Petra Voss, 26, a junior analyst at a competing firm he had been texting with for 7 months. What he did not say was that he had booked a suite for 2 nights. What he did not say was that he had stopped checking his phone the moment the concierge brought the wine list. At 9:11 p.m., Ivy woke up disoriented and walked to the bathroom. Cora heard her fall. By the time Cora reached her, Ivy's jaw was clenched and her small body was rigid against the tile. Cora called 911 first. She called Garrett second, then third, then fourth, with her hand pressed to Ivy's cheek, counting seconds. Then a 5th time as the ambulance pulled onto their street, its lights throwing blue and red across the oak trees Garrett had always meant to trim. At 9:43 p.m., Garrett's phone buzzed with a text from Cora. At Lurie Children's, Ivy had a major seizure. Please call me now. He did not see it for 40 minutes. He had slipped the phone into his jacket pocket, draped over the chair in the suite's sitting room, and when he finally looked, it was because Petra had laughed at something and knocked the jacket to the floor. He read the message. He felt a cold thing move through him. He told Petra he had to make a call. He stepped into the hallway. He called Cora. She answered on the first ring. Cora said. Her voice was a flat, factual thing. They got her stabilized. She's sleeping. The neurologist is adjusting her medication. Oh, thank God. Garrett exhaled. Cora, I'm so sorry, my phone was. I know where your phone was, Cora said. Then she hung up. She did not cry in the hospital. She had learned, somewhere in the years of managing everything alone, to defer the falling apart until the emergency had passed. She sat in the plastic chair beside Ivy's bed and watched the monitors and made a decision. Not a loud decision, not a dramatic one. The quiet, specific kind that changes everything. She called her mother. Harriet Boone was 64 years old and had spent 32 of those years as a family court judge in Cook County before retiring the previous spring. She was not a woman who raised her voice. She did not need to. Harriet had spent 3 decades watching men like Garrett underestimate the damage they caused and then, when consequences arrived, watch them perform remorse. She answered on the second ring. He wasn't there, Cora said, a pause, not of surprise, of calculation. I'll be there in 40 minutes, Harriet said. She arrived at Lurie Children's with a tote bag containing a change of clothes for Cora, 2 cups of good coffee and a yellow legal pad. She sat in the chair across from her daughter and she listened. When Cora was done speaking, Harriet set down her coffee. How long? She asked. Cora looked at Ivy's sleeping face. I think 7 months, maybe longer. Harriet made a note on the legal pad. Where did he tell you he was? Cincinnati client dinner, the Whitmore Group. Harriet wrote that down too. Did he fly or drive? He flew. United. He left at 2. Harriet capped her pen. She looked at her daughter with the calm, level expression she had once used on witnesses who thought they were smarter than the room. Do you want to be done? Harriet asked. Cora pressed her lips together. She looked at the monitors. At the IV line taped to her daughter's small arm. I want him to feel what I felt tonight, Cora said. Calling someone over and over and getting nothing. I want him to know what that's like. That, Harriet said, I can help you with. She did not make threats. She did not call Garrett. She simply drove back home at midnight, sat at her desk and began to work. Harriet had not spent 30 years in family court without building relationships. She knew forensic accountants, private investigators, a former federal prosecutor who owed her a favor, and a financial compliance attorney who had worked 2 major securities cases involving brokerage firms not unlike Meridian Capital. She made 3 calls the following morning. By Friday afternoon, she had names, a hotel confirmation number, and the beginning of a credit card audit going back 14 months. Garrett arrived home at noon on Friday as promised, carrying a box of Cincinnati-style chili he'd bought at the airport gift shop, like a prop in a play he believed he was directing. Cora was at the kitchen table. Ivy was upstairs, home from the hospital with a new prescription and instructions for rest. Harriet was not there. She was already 3 steps ahead. How is she? Garrett asked, setting down the chili. She's resting, Cora said. I'm so sorry I didn't pick up, Cora. The dinner ran long and I put it on silent and I didn't. You didn't? Cora agreed. Something in her voice made him stop. He had expected tears. Maybe an argument he could manage, deflect, apologize his way through. What he got was stillness. She was looking at him the way his own reflection looked at him some mornings before he was ready to be looked at. I'm going to lie down with Ivy, Cora said. She stood up. The chili's in the box. She walked upstairs and did not look back. Garrett stood in his own kitchen feeling a specific unease he could not name. He told himself it was guilt. He told himself Cora was upset, understandably, and that he would find the right moment to smooth it over. Maybe a weekend away, maybe dinner somewhere she liked. He had done it before. She had always come back to equilibrium. He did not know that Harriet had already spoken with 2 of his colleagues at Meridian Capital, not to accuse, just to ask gentle procedural questions about the Whitmore Group account, about who was managing it, about the Cincinnati trip. The Whitmore Group had not had a client dinner on Thursday. Their CFO had been in New York. Garrett had taken a personal trip on company expense. Harriet passed that information to the financial compliance attorney on Saturday morning. 3 weeks passed. Garrett noticed nothing. He went back to work. He texted Petra, who had started pulling back, which he found irritating. He bought Cora flowers once, which she accepted and put in a vase without comment. He told himself things were settling. He was the kind of man who could convince himself of almost anything, as long as no one challenged him directly. At Meridian Capital's quarterly leadership review, held the first Thursday of November, Garrett arrived at the 41st floor conference room, expecting to be introduced as the lead partner on the new Whitmore account. He had prepared a presentation. He had worn the charcoal suit Cora had bought him 2 birthdays ago, the one that always made the room take him more seriously. The review began normally. Metrics, projections, regional performance. Then the company's chief compliance officer, a precise woman named Sandra Okafor, asked everyone except the senior leadership team to step out. Garrett was not asked to step out. He was asked to stay. Sandra set a folder on the table in front of him. Garrett, she said, we've received a formal complaint from an outside financial compliance firm regarding potential misappropriation of company expense accounts. The review covers the past 14 months. Garrett's hand went to his tie. I'm sorry? The Cincinnati trip last month is flagged. There was no client meeting. Whitmore's office confirmed it. We've also identified 6 other personal hotel stays, 2 international flights, and a series of restaurant charges that don't correspond to any client entertainment filings. Those were working dinners, Garrett said. I can explain all of those. You'll have the opportunity to do that, Sandra said, with HR and legal present. We're placing you on administrative leave pending the review. Please surrender your key card. Garrett looked around the table. The men who had laughed at his jokes for 4 years were studying their notepads. This is insane, Garrett said. I have built this division. No one said anything. He drove home in a silence that felt like pressure behind his eyes. He had been set up. Someone had done this deliberately. He just needed to figure out who and why. He needed a lawyer. He pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a long moment before he went inside. Cora was at the dining room table when he walked in. Ivy was at school. The house was very quiet. There was a document on the table in front of her. Garrett looked at it. His name was on it and Cora's and a case number and the word petition at the top. What is this? Divorce filing, Cora said. She did not look up. I've retained an attorney, Cora. He sat down across from her. Cora, I know this has been a hard month and I know I wasn't there when you needed me and I am sorry. Truly, I am. But you can't do this right now. I'm dealing with something at work and I know about the work situation, Cora said. He went still. My mother sent the compliance filing, Cora said. She found the expense records. She found the hotel. She found Petra Voss. Garrett, I know everything. Garrett leaned back in his chair. The room seemed to shift slightly. Your mother, he said flatly. Your mother did this. My mother helped me do this, Cora said. There's a difference. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were dry. She had finished the crying weeks ago, alone, in the parking garage of the hospital, the night Ivy was discharged. She had sat in the car and cried until she couldn't, and then she had driven home and started making lists. You want to fight this? Garrett said. It was not a question. I already am, she said. The attorneys met for the first time the following week. Garrett had hired a firm known for aggressive divorce litigation, a move he believed would intimidate. What he did not know was that Cora's attorney had spent 15 years in family court, had clerked for two of the judges Harriet knew personally, and had once, in a deposition Harriet had presided over, demonstrated that she could take apart a financial portfolio the way a surgeon takes apart a thoracic cavity. Cleanly, completely, and without wasting a single motion. The discovery phase was brutal. Garrett had believed his finances were clean. He had kept the affair spending separate, mostly, credit cards in a business name, transfers routed through a vendor account that had seemed obscure enough. He had been wrong. The forensic accountant Harriet retained pulled 14 months of transactions in 11 days. The number that emerged was $83,400. That was what Garrett had spent on Petra Voss. Hotels, flights, jewelry, 2 weekends in Miami, a weekend in Montreal, and a bracelet from a jeweler on Michigan Avenue that Cora had walked past once and admired, and Garrett had said was too expensive. Cora's attorney presented the number in mediation without inflection. Just the figure, and the documentation behind it, and the date of each transaction. And whether that date corresponded to a date Garrett had claimed to be working, traveling for business, or otherwise unavailable to his family. Garrett's attorney pushed back on several items. He insisted on contesting the primary residence, the investment accounts, and the custody arrangement. He used words like parental alienation and coaching and hostile co-parenting environment, phrases designed to make Cora seem unstable, calculated, the sort of mother who used a child as a chess piece. It was the wrong move. Harriet had anticipated it. She had documented everything over the past 30 days. Garrett's attendance at Ivy's medical appointments, 0 since the hospitalization. His communications with Ivy's school, 0. His response to Cora's texts about Ivy's follow-up blood work, 2 replies, both under 5 words. She had organized it in a timeline. 30 days clearly labeled with source documentation attached. Cora's attorney submitted the timeline to the court on a Tuesday morning. The custody hearing was held 3 weeks later. Ivy did not testify. She was 8. Her school counselor testified instead, gently, about Ivy's expressed anxiety regarding her father's absences, the way she had started carrying a small notebook to school, in which she recorded what time her mother picked her up each day, because she liked to know her mother was coming. The judge awarded Cora primary physical custody. Garrett received every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. He was ordered to attend a parenting course. He was ordered to contribute to Ivy's ongoing neurological care. He was ordered to pay Cora's attorney's fees, which by that point were significant. He walked out of the courthouse in December looking smaller than he had in September. The charcoal suit was the same. Something else was not. He did not see Harriet outside the courthouse. She was already in the car. She had not attended the hearing to watch him lose. She had attended because Cora had asked her to sit in the second row, and that was where she sat, with her hands folded on her tote bag, watching the proceeding with the same level attention she had given 30 years of other people's wreckage. In the months that followed, the compliance review at Meridian Capital concluded. Garrett was terminated. The misappropriation amount was deemed recoverable by the company, which meant civil proceedings on top of the divorce. He could not afford the aggressive litigation firm past February, and by March he had downgraded to a solo practitioner, who had once been a good attorney, and was now stretched thin across too many cases. Petra Voss had stopped responding to his messages before Thanksgiving. She had found out about the compliance case through a mutual colleague, and had, with the practical self-interest of someone who has watched a burning building from the window and decided not to go inside, simply moved on. She blocked his number on a Sunday afternoon and went for a run and did not think about it much afterward. Garrett applied to 4 firms in Chicago and was not called back by any of them. His reputation in the city's finance community was by then thoroughly contaminated. He eventually accepted a position with a smaller firm in suburban Milwaukee, a lateral move presented as a fresh start, which he told himself was temporary. It was not temporary. On a Saturday morning in March, Cora sat in the passenger seat of Harriet's car in the parking lot of Ivy's gymnastics class, watching through the window as Ivy ran across the mat toward her coach. Ivy had started the class in January. It had been the neurologist's idea: structured movement, regular schedule, something that belonged entirely to Ivy. "She's good," Harriet said, watching. "She's been practicing the cartwheel in the hallway for 2 weeks," Cora said. They were quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about going back to school," Cora said. "Finishing the urban planning degree. UIC has a good program," Harriet said. "Your advisor from Northwestern, Dr. Reyes, I think she's at UIC now." Cora looked at her mother. "Did you look that up?" "I may have looked that up," Harriet said, without apology. Cora laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that surprised her by its own arrival. She had not realized until recently how long it had been since she laughed like that. Not the polite kind, not the social kind, but the kind that comes from somewhere low in the chest when something genuinely, unexpectedly relieves you. Through the gymnastics studio window, Ivy completed the cartwheel. She landed wobbly, grabbed her coach's hand, and looked up with a grin that was missing one tooth on the bottom left, the same tooth she had been wiggling for 6 weeks. Cora pressed her hand against the cold glass. The medical bill for the October hospitalization had been $14,000. The settlement had covered it. The settlement had covered a lot of things. The mortgage for 2 years, Ivy's ongoing care, the cost of rebuilding a life from a point where you had been made invisible inside someone else's story. Garrett had called 3 times in January. Cora had not answered. She had no reason to hate him anymore, which was its own kind of freedom. Hate requires attention. She had stopped giving him her attention the night she sat in that hospital chair and made her quiet, specific decision. The things she kept from the marriage were small. A cast iron skillet she'd had since college, a print of Lake Michigan at dusk that hung in her bedroom, the memory of the first year, before everything calcified, when she had believed she was building something real. She kept that memory not because it comforted her, but because it was true, and she had decided to stop cutting the true things out of her life, just because they were complicated. Ivy's name was on the waiting list for a pediatric neurology research program at Northwestern. Dr. Callahan had submitted the application in February. If accepted, her care would be folded into a longitudinal study, which meant better monitoring, better data, better outcomes. It was not guaranteed, but the possibility existed, and Cora had learned, carefully and at cost, the difference between a possibility and a guarantee, and had learned to value the former without demanding it become the latter. Harriet had driven her to the appointment where Dr. Callahan submitted the application. They had gone to lunch afterward, a Vietnamese place near the hospital that they both liked, and Harriet had ordered 2 bowls of pho, and they had sat across from each other in a booth with the winter light coming flat and gray through the window. "You know what I kept thinking about," Cora said, "those first few weeks? Tell me." "I kept thinking about how many times I had adjusted. Every time he changed the plan or came home late or said he was busy, I just absorbed it. I made room. I made myself smaller, so there was room for all of it." Harriet wrapped her hands around the bowl. "You know why people do that? Because they think that's what love looks like, because they've been told it is," Harriet said. "There's a difference." Cora stirred her broth. "I don't want Ivy to learn it the way I did." "Then teach her something else," Harriet said. "You already are." Outside the gymnastics studio window, on that Saturday in March, Ivy tried the cartwheel again. This time she landed steady. She looked up at the window as if she somehow knew her mother was watching, and she waved. Cora waved back. She did not feel victorious. She did not feel healed, exactly, or finished, or any of the clean words people use when they want a story to have a tidy edge. She felt present. She felt like someone who had walked through a fire and was still walking, which is not the same as being untouched, but is sometimes better. Garrett would spend the next several years in Milwaukee, managing accounts for a mid-size firm whose clients were a fraction of what he had once worked with. He would attend his every other weekend visits with Ivy, which were strained and brief and getting no easier. He would think, on certain nights, about the box of Cincinnati chili he had carried through O'Hare like an offering, and about the way Cora had accepted it without expression. And he would understand, slowly and incompletely, what had already been decided before he walked through the door. He never quite figured out where it had started. He assumed it was the expense accounts. He assumed it was Petra talking, or a colleague, or some administrative error that had cascaded into catastrophe. He never thought of the parking garage at Lurie Children's Hospital. He never thought of his mother-in-law sitting at her desk at midnight with a yellow legal pad. He never thought of 5 unanswered calls and what they cost, because men who do not answer do not tend to count the rings. But Cora knew. And Harriet knew. And on a Saturday in March, watching a small girl stick a landing in a cold gymnasium, that was enough.